Welcome to Monk's Moon Temple. Let's settle into this space together. You're in your own environment, but for now, let's imagine we're sitting on a cool stone floor in an ancient place. The air is still. A single candle burns somewhere, casting soft shadows. We're here to talk about something that has haunted humanity since we first looked at our own reflection. We're here to talk about you. Not your job title. Not your name. Not your successes or failures. But the you behind all of that. The one listening right now. Who is that? Where are they located? Do they have a beginning? Will they have an end? This is not a philosophical game. If the Buddha was right, this is the most practical question you can ask. He believed the entire weight of human suffering, the anxiety, the boredom, the quiet despair, rests on a single mistake. We have misidentified ourselves. We've forgotten who we really are. And because we've forgotten, we spend our lives trying to protect a ghost. Today we're exploring one of the most radical teachings the world has ever known, the Buddha's teaching on no-self, or in the ancient Pali language, Anatta. Let me tell you a story about a woman named Elena. Elena was a successful architect in her 40s. She had a beautiful apartment, a loving partner, and a career that gave her purpose. By any measure, she'd built a good life. But internally, Elena felt like she was living in a house of cards. There was a constant underlying anxiety that at any moment everything could collapse. She'd wake in the night with her heart racing, not from nightmares but from a vague dread that seemed to come from nowhere. She'd look at her partner sleeping and feel a strange distance, as if watching her life from behind glass. One Saturday afternoon, Elena wandered through an art museum. She stopped before a large abstract painting. Just splashes of color on canvas. As she stood there, something shifted. She forgot her anxiety, her to-do list, herself. For a few moments, there was just the painting and the looking. Then, as if waking from a dream, she became aware of herself again. But in that moment, a question arose: who was it that was looking? And who is it that's back now? She stood there a long time, trying to locate the one asking the question. Was it in her head? Her chest? Some inner voice? She couldn't find it. She could find thoughts about herself, feelings about herself, memories of herself. But the herself those were supposed to be about, that she couldn't find anywhere. Elena didn't become enlightened that day. She went home, made dinner, returned to work. But the question had been planted. And like a seed underground, it began to grow. If that seed of curiosity is growing in you, if this exploration resonates, please take a moment to subscribe to Monk's Moon Temple. This is a space we're building together, a quiet corner for these ancient questions. Your subscription tells me this work matters. Just click the button below. Thank you. To understand what the Buddha discovered, we need to understand how we normally see ourselves. Close your eyes and feel your sense of being you. There's a feeling of presence, of being a distinct individual located somewhere behind your eyes. It feels solid, continuous, real. The Buddha looked at this feeling with intense precision and found something shocking: that solid feeling of being a self is an illusion. Not that you don't exist. You exist in a way radically different from how you think. Imagine looking at a rope in dim light. For a split second, you see a snake. Your heart jumps. Your body tenses. You're already planning escape. Then you look closer and see it's just a rope. The snake was never there. But your fear was real. This is what the Buddha said about the self. The experience of being a self is real. The fear of losing it is real. But the self itself, as a solid permanent entity, that's the snake. When you look closely with the light of awareness, you find not a self but 5 things. 5 aggregates. 5 processes constantly weaving themselves into the illusion of a solid self. The Buddha called these the 5 khandhas. Understanding them is like putting on glasses that let you see the rope clearly. Let's look at these 5 aggregates as 5 streams flowing into a river. The river feels like one thing but is really 5 currents mixing together. The first aggregate is form. This covers everything physical, your body, the sensations, the physical world you experience through senses. It's the raw material, the canvas. The second aggregate is feeling. This is the primitive split-second reaction to every experience, tagging it as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The third aggregate is perception. This is the factory of labels and concepts that recognizes things and names them. The fourth aggregate is mental formations. This covers thoughts, intentions, desires, aversions, habits, all your emotional responses and conditioned patterns. The fifth aggregate is consciousness, the raw awareness that makes experience possible, the screen on which the movie plays. These 5 aggregates interpenetrate at lightning speed, creating the seamless movie we call my life. And right in the middle of this movie is a main character who feels real, who has a name and history. That character is you. Or so it seems. The Buddha asks us to look closer. Let's go deeper into why this teaching of no self matters for your daily life. The Buddha wasn't interested in abstract philosophy. He was interested in one thing only, the end of suffering. So when we talk about Anatta, we're discussing the very mechanism of your happiness and unhappiness. Think about your own life. When were you last truly upset? Someone criticized you. You didn't get something you wanted. You lost something you valued. Now look closely. What actually hurt? Was it the words themselves? Sounds vibrating in air? Was it the loss itself? An absence of something? What caused the pain was more subtle. There was a sense that something had happened to you. That someone had attacked you. That you had lost something belonging to you. The pain came from identification. From the feeling that this body, this reputation, this relationship was me or mine. Without that sense of ownership, criticism is just sound. Loss is just change. But with ownership, every change becomes a threat. Every criticism becomes a wound. This is what the Buddha saw clearly. The self we're trying to protect is exactly what makes us vulnerable to suffering. It's like a man who builds a house of straw and then spends his life terrified of fire. The solution isn't a fireproof straw house. The solution is to see you don't need a straw house at all. You've been living under the open sky all along. Let me tell you a story about James, a high school teacher who loved his job but couldn't handle being evaluated. Every year, his principal observed his class and wrote a report. Every year, James spent weeks before in terror, losing sleep, snapping at family. Afterward, no matter how positive the report, he'd find one tiny criticism and obsess for months. One year, the principal wrote an overwhelmingly positive report but suggested he could call on girls as often as boys, noting a slight imbalance. One sentence. James couldn't let it go. He told himself he was a sexist, a failure. He spiraled into depression for weeks. Finally, he saw a therapist who asked, "Who is it that's been criticized?" James said, "Me." The therapist said, "Let's look at this me. Did she criticize your body?" "No." "Your feelings?" "She didn't know them." "Your thoughts?" "She criticized one behavior." "So this me that feels wounded, is it your body, feelings, or thoughts?" James was quiet. The therapist continued, "You've taken one comment about one behavior and turned it into an indictment of your entire being. You added a story that wasn't there. That story causes your suffering, not the comment." James began to see it. The comment was just words. The pain came from the story about what it meant about him. And that story was built on assuming a solid, permanent him could be judged and found wanting. But when he looked for that him, he couldn't find it. He found thoughts about himself, feelings about himself, memories of himself. But the himself all this was supposed to be about was nowhere to be found. This is the practical power of understanding Anatta. It doesn't mean you stop feeling things. It means you stop adding the story that turns every experience into a verdict on your worth. The criticism comes. You feel sensations, tightening in the chest, heat in the face. That's just feeling. Thoughts arise, maybe she's right, maybe she's wrong. That's mental formations. Without the story of me, the experience arises and passes like a cloud. With the story of me, it sticks. It festers. It becomes suffering. Consider modern life and our phones. You reach for your phone dozens of times daily. Why? Usually seeking validation. A like on a post. A comment. A reply. Each notification feels like confirmation that you exist, that you matter. Each absence feels like rejection. You check again and again. What drives this compulsion? The self. The self needing constant reassurance it's okay. Without belief in a self needing this, the phone becomes just a tool. You use it when needed. You put it down when not. The compulsion disappears. Watch yourself reaching for your phone today. Notice the subtle sense of need behind it. That need is the self, grasping for confirmation it exists. Let me tell you about Anatta, a lawyer who prided herself on competence but suffered from imposter syndrome. Every time she entered a room of older male lawyers, she felt like a fraud, convinced someone would discover she didn't know what she was doing. She'd sit in meetings thinking, they all belong here. I don't. It kept her quiet, made her work twice as hard, stole countless hours of peace. One day a mentor said, Anatta, you think those confident lawyers have something you don't, a solid core of certainty. I've done this 40 years and can tell you, none of us have that. We're all figuring it out. Some just pretend better. Anatta started watching colleagues more carefully. The most confident-seeming people often made the biggest mistakes. The ones speaking with absolute certainty were usually repeating things heard elsewhere. She realized the solid self she imagined others had was exactly that, imagined. They were all just streams of thoughts and feelings, pretending to be solid. In that realization, her imposter syndrome began dissolving. Not because she became more confident, but because she saw there was no solid self to be confident about. There was just flowing, functioning, doing lawyering things. And flowing doesn't need confidence. It just needs to flow. This is the heart of the Buddha's psychological insight. The self is not a thing you have. It's a process you do. And like any process, it can be observed, understood, and ultimately relaxed. The question isn't how to become a better self. The question is how to see through the illusion of self altogether. The answer is mindfulness, observing the five aggregates without getting caught in the story of self. You watch the body breathe. Feelings arise and pass. Perceptions label experience. Mental formations react. Consciousness knows it all. In the watching, something becomes clear. None of this is you. None belongs to you. It's just nature happening. The breath breathes itself. Feelings feel themselves. Thoughts think themselves. Awareness knows itself. And through it all, there's peace. Not the peace of getting what you want, but the peace of no longer needing to get anything. The peace of resting in what already is. Let's explore what often confuses people about no self. If there's no self, then who makes choices? Who practices meditation? Who becomes enlightened? The Buddha's answer is subtle. Everything we experience, including our sense of being a chooser, is just more of the five aggregates. The feeling of making a decision is a mental formation. The thought I choose this is a perception. There's no separate chooser behind the choosing. There's just choosing happening. Have you ever driven somewhere familiar and arrived without memory of the journey? You made countless decisions, when to brake, when to turn, but you didn't experience making them. They just happened automatically. Was there a self making those decisions? Or was there just deciding happening? Most would say the decisions were made by habit. But that's how all decisions happen. The ones you think you're making consciously are also just the result of conditions. The feeling of conscious choice arises after the decision, not before. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Brain activity associated with a decision can be detected seconds before you're consciously aware of it. The feeling of I chose happens after the choice is made. So who is this I? It's a mental formation. A story the mind tells itself. Let me tell you about Yuki, a concert pianist since age 4. She could play extraordinary pieces without thinking. Her fingers just knew where to go. A friend asked, "How do you remember all those notes?" Yuki realized she couldn't write out the score from memory. But when she sat at the piano, her hands knew what to do. The knowledge was in the doing. Her friend said, "So who's playing? Your hands or you?" Yuki laughed. "When I'm playing well, there's no me and the piano. There's just playing happening." This is what the Buddha pointed to. In moments of flow, the sense of a separate self disappears. There's just the activity happening. The self isn't necessary for action. It's often an impediment. When you're thinking about yourself while doing something, you perform worse. When the self drops away, there's just the action, pure and complete. Let's look at relationships. So much relationship suffering comes from this sense of self. You have an idea of yourself as a good partner. Your partner does something challenging that idea, and you feel threatened. You have an idea of your partner as someone who should meet your needs. They fail, and you feel hurt. All of this is the self, grasping at identities. Without a self to protect, you could love more freely because you're not trying to get something from love. You could forgive more easily because there's no self that was wronged. Let me tell you about Miguel and Sofia, married 25 years and miserable. They fought constantly about who was right, who owed what. They came to a therapist who said, "You don't have a marriage problem. You have a self problem." He had them sit facing each other and observe what arose. Miguel felt anger, tightness in his chest, heat in his face. Sofia felt hurt, heaviness in her heart, a lump in her throat. The therapist guided them to just feel the physical sensations without adding the story about each other. After a few minutes, the sensations shifted. The therapist said, the pain was the physical sensations. The suffering was the story you added. The pain comes and goes. The suffering sticks because the self grabs the story and won't let go. By the end, something shifted. There was more space. Less self. And in that space, they could actually see each other, not as enemies, but as fellow suffering human beings. Let's talk about desire. We constantly want things. Better body, better job, better relationship. Desire itself isn't the problem. The problem is identification with desire. The belief that I am the one who wants, and that getting what I want will make me happy. The Buddha saw desire as another mental formation. It arises based on conditions. You see something pleasant, and the mind reaches toward it. That's desire. Natural. But then the mind grabs the desire and says, "This is mine. This desire is me." Now you're hooked. Now you'll suffer until you get what you want, and then suffer because it doesn't last. A businessman came to a monk with a problem. He said, "I'm wealthy but unhappy. I keep wanting more. One house, then another. More money than 10 lifetimes, and I still want more. What's wrong?" The monk said, "You think the wanting is you. But wanting is just something arising, like a cloud passing through the sky. You don't think the cloud is the sky. You just let it pass." The businessman said, "But I can't let it pass. It's too strong." The monk picked up a cup of water. "If I hold this cup a few minutes, it's nothing. If I hold it an hour, my arm aches. If I hold it a day, I'm in agony. The cup's weight doesn't change. How long I hold it changes. Your desires are like that cup. They're not heavy in themselves. You just never put them down. You carry them constantly. You think they're you. So of course they feel unbearable." The businessman understood. He didn't stop having desires. But he stopped identifying with them so tightly. He started noticing when desire arose, and instead of grabbing it, he'd just watch. Sometimes it passed quickly. Sometimes it lingered. But he no longer felt owned by his desires. He was learning to let the cup down. This is the practice. Moment by moment, noticing when the self grabs onto experience and claims it. Just noticing. You don't have to stop the grabbing. Just see it clearly. And in the seeing, something shifts. The grip loosens. The self relaxes. And what's left is just what's here, waiting to be noticed. Let's turn to something the Buddha considered essential for understanding no self, impermanence. The Buddha observed that everything without exception is constantly changing. Your body changes. Your feelings change. Your thoughts change. Your relationships change. Your circumstances change. Even what you think of as your personality, your core identity, is changing. Look back at yourself 10 years ago. Are you the same person? The body is different. The thoughts are different. The priorities are different. What remained constant? If you're honest, nothing. And yet there's a feeling of continuity, isn't there? A sense that you're the same you, just older. Where does that feeling come from? It comes from memory and from the speed of change. Change happens slowly enough that we don't notice it moment to moment, so we imagine it's not happening at all. But it's happening constantly, in every cell, every thought, every feeling. The Buddha said our suffering comes from resisting this truth. We want things to stay the same. We want our bodies to stay young. We want our loved ones to stay alive. We want our pleasant feelings to last forever. But reality doesn't cooperate. Everything changes. And so we suffer. The solution isn't to stop things from changing. That's impossible. The solution is to stop resisting change. To see so deeply that everything changes that you no longer expect permanence. And when you stop expecting permanence, you stop being disappointed by impermanence. You can actually start to appreciate things more because you know they won't last. A sunset is beautiful precisely because it's fleeting. A flower is precious because it will wilt. A moment with a loved one is sacred because it will never come again. Impermanence isn't a tragedy. It's what makes life possible. Without change, there'd be no growth, no learning, no healing, no possibility. Change is the very fabric of existence. Let me tell you a story about Lena, a gardener who loved watching things grow but also wanted them to stay as they were. She'd plant a beautiful flower and then feel sad when it began to fade. She'd spend months creating the perfect arrangement, then feel disappointed when a storm damaged it. One day an older gardener visited. Lena showed her around, apologizing for plants not at their peak. This one is past its bloom. This one got damaged by wind. The older gardener said, "Lena, you're missing the point. A garden isn't a photograph. It's not meant to be one perfect moment frozen in time. A garden is a process. It's birth and growth and decay and death and rebirth. The dying flowers are just as much the garden as the blooming ones. If you try to freeze it, you kill it. The garden is alive because it changes." Lena looked at her garden with new eyes. She saw the buds and blooms and wilting petals all as one living whole. She saw the cycle, not just the moments. Her disappointment dissolved. Not because her garden became perfect, but because she stopped demanding it be perfect. She let it be what it was, alive, changing, impermanent. And in that letting be, she found peace. This is what the Buddha offers. Not a way to make life perfect, but a way to make peace with life exactly as it is, with all its imperfection, change, and uncertainty. The self we're so desperately trying to protect is itself impermanent. It's changing moment to moment. The self of this moment is not the self of the next moment. So what are we protecting? Who are we preserving? The self you're trying to protect is like a sandcastle you're trying to protect from the tide. The tide will come. It always does. The question is whether you'll spend your life anxiously building walls, or whether you'll learn to enjoy the sandcastle while it's there and let it go when the tide comes. Let's practice with impermanence. Bring attention to your breath. Notice each breath is different. The inhale is not the exhale. This breath is not the last breath. All unique, arising and passing. Now notice your thoughts. Catch one as it arises, watch it linger, watch it pass. They're all doing that constantly. Now notice your feelings. Maybe pleasant or unpleasant somewhere in your body. Watch it. Does it stay the same? Or does it shift, change, eventually pass? Now notice your sense of self. That feeling of I am here, listening. Is it solid and permanent? Or is it just another arising and passing phenomenon, flickering moment by moment? Just watch. Just notice. You don't have to change anything. Just see things as they actually are, impermanent, impersonal, and ultimately, not you. Let's explore one of the most misunderstood aspects of Buddhism, rebirth. If there's no self, no soul, then what is it that is reborn? This question has puzzled students for 2,500 years. The Buddha was asked this directly by a monk named Vakagata. Vakagata asked, "Is there a self?" The Buddha was silent. He asked, "Is there no self?" Again, silence. Later, his disciple Anatta asked why he didn't answer. The Buddha explained that to say there is a self would be to believe in a permanent, unchanging soul. To say there is no self would be to believe death is the end of everything, which negates karma and rebirth. Both are wrong views. The truth is beyond both. So how does rebirth work without a self? Let's create a metaphor. Imagine a vast ocean with waves constantly arising and passing. Each wave looks separate. It has its own shape, size, moment of rising and falling. You could name each wave. You could track its journey. But is the wave really separate? Or is it just the ocean doing what oceans do, moving in a particular pattern for a duration? When one wave subsides, does it cease to exist? Or does it merge back into the ocean, its energy contributing to the next wave, and the next? The wave that rises later isn't the same as the wave that fell before. The water molecules are different. The shape is different. But it's not entirely unrelated either. It's part of the same ocean. The energy that moved the first wave continues, transformed, into the movement of the next wave. Rebirth is like that. The you of this life is a wave on the ocean of existence. It has a particular form, a particular pattern of 5 aggregates, a particular momentum of desires, habits, and karma. At death, that wave subsides. The physical form dissolves. But the momentum doesn't disappear. The energy of all those habits, desires, karma, that continues. It's like a flame passing from one candle to another. The first flame is not the same as the second. It's a different flame burning different wax. But the second flame is not entirely unrelated. It was lit by the first. The energy, the habit of burning, continues. Let me tell you a story about a man named David who came to a meditation center feeling completely lost. He was in his 50s, recently divorced, recently retired, recently diagnosed with a health condition. Everything that had defined him, his marriage, his career, his physical vitality, was gone or changing. He said to the teacher, "I don't know who I am anymore. Everything I thought I was has been taken away." The teacher smiled and said, "Wonderful. This is the best thing that could happen to you." David was shocked. How could losing everything be wonderful? The teacher explained, "You've spent your whole life building an identity out of things that come and go, your job, your relationship, your health. You thought you were those things. Now that they're changing, you think you're disappearing. But you were never those things. You were just the one watching them come and go. Now that the props have been removed, you have a chance to see what's really there when nothing is covering it up." David stayed at the center for weeks, practicing watching his mind. He watched thoughts about his ex-wife arise and pass. He watched fears about his health arise and pass. He watched memories of his career arise and pass. Underneath all that coming and going, he began to sense something. Not a thing. More like a space. An awareness that wasn't affected by any of it. Thoughts would come, and this space would hold them. Fears would come, and this space would hold them. When they passed, the space remained unchanged. He began to realize that this space, this awareness, was more truly him than any of the stories he'd been telling. And this space had never been divorced. It had never been employed. It had never been sick or healthy. It had just been watching, all along. This is the beginning of understanding Anatta. Not that you don't exist, but that you exist as the space in which all changing phenomena appear, not as the phenomena themselves. The wave discovers it was always the ocean. The flame discovers it was always just fire, never the wax. And in that discovery, the fear of death begins to dissolve. What dies? Only the wave, never the ocean. Only the wax, never the fire. What you really are was never born and will never die. It has just been watching, all along. Now let's connect all of this to your daily life. The Buddha gave a name to the dissatisfaction we all feel, dukkha. It's often translated as suffering, but that's too strong. It's more like a pervasive unsatisfactoriness, a subtle dis-ease. It's the feeling that something is off, that things could be better, that you need to get something or become something to finally be okay. Think of your mind as a radio. The five aggregates constantly broadcast their signals. But the radio isn't tuned properly. There's a constant low-level static in the background. That static is dukkha. Most of the time you don't notice it because you've lived with it your whole life. You try to tune it out by turning up the volume on pleasant experiences, a good meal, a new relationship, a vacation. For a moment, the music is so loud you can't hear the static. But as soon as the experience fades, the static returns, more noticeable than ever. Why is the static there? The Buddha said it's because the radio is trying to tune into a station that doesn't exist. It's trying to find a permanent, stable, satisfying signal in a stream of constant change. The very act of trying to grasp and hold on to changing signals creates the static. We grasp at our bodies, wanting them to stay young. They age. Static arises. We grasp at pleasant feelings, wanting them to last. They pass. Static arises. We grasp at our identities, wanting them to be recognized. They're ignored. Static arises. Dukkha isn't the changing nature of things. Dukkha is our relationship to that change. It's the grasping. It's the millions of times a day we say, I want this or I don't want that. It's the tension of trying to control the uncontrollable. Let me tell you a story about Priya, a painter who learned this directly. Priya loved painting. But whenever she finished a piece, she'd feel a brief satisfaction, then a wave of anxiety. Was it good enough? Would anyone like it? She'd immediately think about the next painting, how she could do better, how she could finally create something that would make her feel complete. One day she was struggling with a piece for weeks. Nothing worked. Frustrated, she grabbed a brush loaded with black paint and made a wild slash across the canvas, ruining it completely. She stepped back and looked. And for the first time in weeks, her mind was quiet. There was no striving, no hoping, no fearing. Just this canvas with a black line across it. In that moment, she saw something. Her suffering hadn't been caused by the painting not being good enough. Her suffering had been caused by grasping at the idea of a painting that would finally make her feel complete. The moment she destroyed that possibility, the grasping stopped. And in the absence of grasping, there was peace. Priya didn't stop painting. But she painted differently. She still put all her skill into each piece. But she no longer looked to the painting to give her something it never could. She painted because painting was what she did, not because she needed the painting to be something. The grasping had loosened. The static had quieted. This is the path. Not the destruction of experience, but the transformation of our relationship to experience. Not the annihilation of self, but the seeing through of the illusion that there's a self to protect. You might think this sounds bleak. If there's no self, then nothing matters. Why be good? Why love? Why do anything? This is a common misunderstanding. Actually, the opposite is true. Why do we hurt others? Almost always because we're protecting or promoting this fragile sense of self. I lie to protect my image. I get angry because my views are threatened. I'm jealous because someone else has something I want for myself. The entire edifice of human cruelty is built on the illusion of a separate self. When that illusion is seen through, the foundation for cruelty collapses. If there's no me to protect and no you who is fundamentally separate, then what is there to fight for? What is there to be jealous of? A teacher once pointed to a wave in the ocean. That wave is suffering. It's terrified. It looks at other waves and feels competition. It fears the rocks. It's anxious about the shore where it will break. Then he pointed to the vast ocean. The ocean does not suffer. It does not fear rocks. It does not compete. Why? Because the ocean knows it's the ocean. It knows the waves are just its own temporary forms. When we see through the illusion of separate self, we shift identity from wave to ocean. We realize our true nature is not this small, frightened, grasping body-mind. It's the awareness in which all of this arises and passes. It's vast, peaceful, already complete. And from that perspective, compassion for all the other waves arises naturally. Their suffering is our suffering. Their joy is our joy. There's no separation. Let me tell you another story about a man named Marcus. Marcus was a successful businessman who had built a company from nothing into a multinational corporation. He was respected, feared, and wealthy beyond measure. But he couldn't sleep at night. He was constantly worried about competitors, about market shifts, about employees betraying him. His whole life was a battle to protect and expand his empire, which he saw as an extension of himself. One day he heard about a meditation teacher who lived in a small hut in the mountains. Out of desperation, Marcus went to see him. He climbed the mountain, found the hut, and sat down across from the teacher. He said, "I have everything, but I have nothing. I'm miserable. Can you help me?" The teacher said, "Tell me about yourself." Marcus spent the next hour describing his achievements, his company, his wealth, his influence. He talked about deals he'd made, competitors he'd crushed, the empire he'd built. The teacher listened patiently. When Marcus finished, the teacher said, "You've told me about your possessions, your accomplishments, your enemies, and your empire. But you haven't told me about yourself. Where are you in all of this?" Marcus was confused. "I am my possessions," he said. "I am my accomplishments. I am my empire. Without them, I'm nothing." The teacher picked up a cup of tea and held it out. "This cup contains tea. Without the tea, is it still a cup?" Marcus nodded. The teacher emptied the cup onto the ground. "Now it's empty. Is it still a cup?" Marcus nodded again. The teacher said, "You have filled yourself with possessions and accomplishments the way this cup was filled with tea. You think you are the tea. But you are the cup. The tea comes and goes. The cup remains. You have mistaken the contents for the container." Marcus didn't understand immediately. But he stayed in the mountains for a month, meditating, watching his mind. He watched thoughts about his company arise and pass. He watched fears about his competitors arise and pass. He watched memories of his deals arise and pass. Underneath all that coming and going, he began to sense the cup. The container. The awareness that held it all. And he realized that this awareness had never made a single deal. It had never crushed a competitor. It had never built an empire. It had just been watching, all along. And this awareness was peaceful. It was complete. It needed nothing. When Marcus went back to his company, he was different. He still ran the business. He still made decisions. But he no longer felt that the business was him. The fears quieted. The grasping loosened. He could finally sleep. This is the heart of the Buddha's teaching. Not a philosophy to believe, but a path to walk. A way of seeing that transforms everything. So where does this leave us practically? How do we begin to live from this understanding? The Buddha said it's through mindfulness meditation. Not forcing your mind to be blank, but learning to observe the five aggregates without getting lost in the story of self. Let's practice together for a few moments. Bring your attention to your breath. Feel the air moving in and out. That's form. Notice if the breathing feels pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. That's feeling. Notice if your mind is labeling the experience. This is meditation, this is boring. That's perception. Notice if any desires or aversions arise, wanting this to be over, wanting it to last longer. That's mental formations. Finally, notice the awareness noticing all of this. That's consciousness. Now ask yourself, in all of this, where is the self? Is it in the breath? The feeling? The labeling? The wanting? The knowing? Or is it just the story that all of this belongs to someone? Just rest in that question. Don't try to answer. Just hold it gently. Who am I? Not as a question for words, but as a pointer to look deeper. Who is aware right now? Who is breathing? Who is feeling? Just look. And if you can't find anyone, that's okay. That's the point. That's the beginning of wisdom. Let me tell you a story about a woman named Sarah who came to a teacher with a question. She said, "I've been practicing meditation for years. I've studied the teachings. I understand intellectually that there's no self. But I don't feel it. I still feel like a solid me in here, and I still suffer. What am I doing wrong?" The teacher said, "Come with me for a walk." They walked out of the meditation hall and into a forest. They walked for a long time in silence. Eventually they came to a river. The teacher pointed to the river and said, "Look at the water. Is it the same water that was here a moment ago?" Sarah looked. The water was flowing constantly. "No," she said. "The water now is different from the water then." The teacher nodded. "Now look at the river itself. Is it the same river that was here 100 years ago?" Sarah considered. "The banks might be different," she said. "The course might have shifted. But it's still the same river." The teacher said, "You're wrong. It's not the same river. It's never the same river from one moment to the next. The name is the same. The location is roughly the same. But the river itself is constantly changing. There is no permanent river to be found. There's only this flowing, this changing, this becoming." Sarah was quiet for a long time, watching the water. Then she said, "But we still call it a river." The teacher smiled. "Yes. We use the word river as a convenience. It helps us communicate. It helps us orient ourselves. But if we believe there's actually a permanent, unchanging thing called a river that exists apart from all this flowing water, we're mistaken. The river is a process, not a thing." The teacher paused, then continued. "You are like that river. The name Sarah is a convenience. It helps you function in the world. But if you look for a permanent, unchanging Sarah that exists apart from all these flowing thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, you won't find her. There's just this flowing, this changing, this becoming. And this flowing, this changing, this becoming, this is what you are. Not a thing, but a process. Not a noun, but a verb. Not a destination, but a journey." Sarah looked at the river for a long time. And something in her softened. She didn't become enlightened in that moment. But she stopped looking for a solid self that wasn't there. And in the stopping, there was a kind of peace. The peace of not needing to be a thing. The peace of just flowing. This understanding has profound implications for how we live. Consider how much of our energy goes into maintaining a consistent self. We want to be seen as reliable, so we hide our inconsistencies. We want to be seen as strong, so we hide our vulnerabilities. We want to be seen as successful, so we hide our failures. We're constantly managing an image, protecting a reputation, curating a persona. And it's exhausting. Why? Because the self we're trying to present doesn't actually exist. It's a fiction. And maintaining a fiction takes enormous energy. When you see through the illusion, you can relax. You don't have to be consistent because there's no solid self to be consistent about. You can be whatever arises in each moment, strong now, weak later, certain now, confused later, successful now, failing later. It's all just the river flowing. None of it is you. None of it defines you. You are the flowing itself, not any particular shape the flowing takes. Let me tell you about a woman named Rachel who learned this in her workplace. Rachel was a manager at a tech company. She felt enormous pressure to be confident, decisive, and in control at all times. She thought that's what a good leader looked like. But inside, she often felt uncertain, confused, and scared. She'd spend hours preparing for meetings, trying to anticipate every question so she'd never be caught off guard. She'd lie awake at night replaying conversations, worrying about whether she'd said the right thing. One day, in a meeting, a difficult question came up that she hadn't anticipated. Her mind went blank. Panic rose. And then, for some reason, instead of trying to cover it up, she just said, "You know what? I don't have a good answer for that right now. I need to think about it." There was a pause. And then something unexpected happened. The tension in the room eased. Other people started offering their own uncertainties, their own questions. The conversation became real. After the meeting, several colleagues thanked her. They said they'd been feeling the same way but were afraid to say it. Rachel realized that her attempts to appear certain had been isolating her from her team. Her willingness to be uncertain had connected them. She saw that the self she'd been trying to protect, the confident, decisive manager, wasn't helping anyone. Letting go of that self, even for a moment, created space for genuine connection. She didn't stop being a manager. But she stopped trying to be a perfect manager. She let herself be what she actually was, a human being, flowing along, sometimes knowing, sometimes not, just like everyone else. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed to. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from the burden of being a fixed self. Not freedom from action, but freedom from the anxiety of how our actions will reflect on us. Not freedom from relationships, but freedom from the constant negotiation of who owes what to whom. When you see through the self, you're free to respond to life as it actually is, not as you think it should be based on some image you're trying to maintain. You're free to love without worrying about whether you're being loved enough in return. You're free to work without needing your work to define you. You're free to fail without feeling like a failure. You're free to be exactly what you are in each moment, a constantly changing flow of experience, participating in a constantly changing world. And in that freedom, there's a peace that's not dependent on anything going right. It's the peace of being what you already are. It's the peace of the river, just flowing. We have been on a long journey together. We've sat on the cool stone floor of Monk's Moon Temple. We've looked at the stranger in the mirror with Elena. We've taken apart the house of self and found its 5 components. We've watched James discover that criticism is just sound without the story of me. We've seen Yuki lose herself in the flow of piano playing and glimpse what exists when the self drops away. We've witnessed Miguel and Sophia find a moment of connection when they stopped adding stories about each other. We've learned from the businessman and the monk that desires are only heavy because we carry them so long. We've watched Lena discover that a garden is alive precisely because it changes. We've followed David as he found the awareness beneath his lost identities. We've seen Priya find peace in a ruined painting when the grasping stopped. We've walked with Sarah to the river and understood that we are not things but processes. We've watched Marcus realize he is the cup, not the tea. We've seen Rachel find freedom in admitting she didn't have the answer. All of these stories point to one thing: the self you've been trying so hard to protect, promote, and perfect is not what you think it is. The question the Buddha asked, the question at the heart of this entire teaching, is the same one I'll leave with you now. Who are you? Not your name. Not your job. Not your history. Not your body. Not your feelings. Not your thoughts. Not even your consciousness. Go deeper. Rest in the question itself. Let it work on you. Let it dissolve the assumptions you've carried since childhood. The answer is not a concept you can grasp. It's a mystery you can live. It's the peace that passes all understanding. It's the end of suffering. It's the smile of the Buddha. Let me tell you one final story. There was a young woman named Anna who had suffered from anxiety her entire life. She tried therapy, medication, exercise, diet changes, everything. Nothing worked for long. The anxiety always returned. It was like a background hum that never really went away. One day, a friend recommended a meditation teacher. Anna was skeptical but desperate enough to try. She went to see the teacher and explained her situation. The teacher listened and then asked a simple question: who is it that's anxious? Anna said, me. I'm anxious. The teacher said, let's look at this me. When you feel anxious, what do you actually experience? Anna thought about it. My heart races, she said. My chest tightens. My thoughts spin. The teacher said, so you experience physical sensations and thoughts. That's all. Now, where in those sensations and thoughts is the me that's anxious? Anna was quiet. She couldn't find it. The teacher said, the anxiety is real. The sensations are real. The thoughts are real. But the me that you think is being anxious, that's an addition. That's a story. The anxiety arises and passes on its own. But when you add the story that this is happening to me, that this anxiety is mine, that this anxiety means something about me, then it sticks. Then it becomes suffering. Anna didn't understand immediately. But she started practicing. When anxiety arose, she'd just feel the sensations. Just watch the thoughts. And she noticed something remarkable. Without the story of me, the anxiety still came, but it also went. It moved through her like weather moves through the sky. It was uncomfortable, but it wasn't suffering. The suffering came from the story that this shouldn't be happening, that something was wrong with her, that she needed to get rid of it. Over time, her relationship with anxiety transformed. It still appeared sometimes, but it no longer owned her. She had discovered that she was the sky, not the weather. The sky doesn't suffer when storms come. It just holds them. And eventually, they pass. This is what the Buddha offered. Not a technique to get rid of difficult experiences, but a way to relate to all experiences, pleasant and unpleasant, without adding the suffering of self. The self is the add-on. The self is the extra. The self is the story we tell about experience, not experience itself. And when we see that, really see it, something shifts. The grip loosens. The struggle ends. Not because we've finally gotten what we want, but because we've stopped needing to get anything. We've stopped needing to be anything. We've discovered that what we are is already complete, already whole, already at peace. It always was. We just couldn't see it through the noise of the self. Let's sit with this for a moment. Bring your attention to your breath. Feel the air moving in and out. Notice the sensations in your body. Notice any feelings arising, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Notice any thoughts appearing and disappearing. Notice the awareness that's noticing all of this. Now ask yourself, in all of this, where is the self? Is it in the breath? The sensations? The feelings? The thoughts? The awareness? Or is the self just the story that all of this belongs to someone? Just rest in that question. Don't try to answer. Just hold it gently. Who am I? Let the question resonate. Let it work on you. You don't need to figure it out. You just need to ask it sincerely and then listen. Not for an answer in words, but for a shift in perception. For a moment of recognition. For the sudden seeing that what you've been looking for is what's been looking all along. The Buddha's teaching on no-self is not a belief to adopt. It's an invitation to look. To look so closely, so honestly, so persistently that you see through the illusion. And in that seeing, to discover what's always been there. Not a self. Not no-self. Something else entirely. Something that can't be captured in words. Something that each of us must see for ourselves. The Buddha couldn't give it to you. No teacher can. All they can do is point. The rest is up to you. The path is yours to walk. The looking is yours to do. The freedom is yours to realize. Thank you for spending this time with me here at Monk's Moon Temple. If this journey has meant something to you, if it has sparked a curiosity to look deeper, please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing. We have many more paths to walk together, many more ancient teachings to explore in this modern world. Until next time, be kind to yourself. Be kind to all the other waves in the ocean. And keep looking. Not for something to find, but for the one who's looking. That's where the mystery lives. That's where the peace is. That's where you've been all along, waiting to be noticed. Goodbye.